He found her trembling in the ruins, an alien orphan hunted by warrior races. Against every law, against every decree, he chose to save her. And in that moment, the galaxy turned against him, yet she turned toward him.
He found her in the ruins, small and trembling, an alien orphan abandoned by the warrior races who had slaughtered her people. The silence of the battlefield was heavy, broken only by her shallow breaths, and he knew that leaving her meant condemning her to certain death. Every law, every decree, every warning told him to walk away, but something deeper pulled him forward. He reached out, his hand steady, his voice calm, and she looked at him with eyes that carried both fear and defiance. She expected cruelty, expected rejection, expected him to turn away. Yet he did not. He chose her, and in that choice, the galaxy turned against him. Her people had been erased, her guardians slaughtered, her home burned. She had been taught that humans were fragile, irrational, incapable of surviving the wrath of warrior races. Yet here was one who stood unbroken, who carried scars but refused to bow, who reached for her not out of pity but out of instinct. She whispered, her voice trembling, "You should have left me, but you didn't." The words carried disbelief, carried sorrow, carried the faint spark of hope she had long buried. He answered simply, "Because you matter." The warrior races declared him traitor, their decree swift and merciless. To save her was to defy them, to protect her was to invite death. Yet he did not falter. He carried her through the ruins, his steps steady, his resolve unyielding. She watched him, her heart trembling, her certainty dissolving. She had been taught that survival was impossible, that compassion was weakness, that love was forbidden. Yet now she saw a human who defied all of it, who carried her without hesitation, who risked himself without calculation. She began to study him, fascinated by the way his emotions shifted without restraint. He could speak of sorrow and still smile, could recall loss and still find hope, could bleed and still stand. Her people had silenced such contradictions, had buried emotion beneath law and logic, but he carried them openly, unashamed. She realized that perhaps humans were different, that perhaps humans carried something her people did not: emotion unbound, courage unmeasured, love beyond logic. The silence of exile grew less heavy, less eternal. She found herself speaking more, her voice softer, her heart lighter. She confessed fragments of her past, her scars, her loneliness. He listened without judgment, his silence steady, his presence unyielding. She felt her soul awaken, her loneliness dissolve, her hope return. She realized that perhaps exile was not death, perhaps solitude was not eternal, perhaps survival was not hers alone. The warrior races hunted them, their decree echoing across the stars. Yet she no longer feared. She had been sentenced to die, abandoned to solitude, denied love. But now she had found him, the human who refused to break, the human who chose her. She realized that perhaps death was not her fate, perhaps exile was not her end, perhaps survival was not hers alone. She realized that perhaps she had found something greater, something unforgettable, something eternal. She had expected his choice to be fleeting, a reckless impulse that would fade once the weight of the galaxy pressed down upon him. Yet as days passed in the ruins, she saw that his resolve did not waver. He carried her through hunger, through silence, through nights where shadows whispered of warrior assassins hunting them. His voice remained steady, his presence unyielding, his compassion relentless. She began to watch him differently, fascinated by the way his emotions shifted without restraint. He could speak of sorrow and still smile, could recall loss and still find hope, could bleed and still stand. Her people had silenced such contradictions, had buried emotion beneath law and logic, but he carried them openly, unashamed. She asked him why, her voice sharp, her suspicion heavy. He answered simply, "Because to feel is to live." The words struck her harder than any decree, heavier than any punishment. She realized that perhaps her exile had not been death, but a chance to see what her people had denied. She found herself speaking more, her voice softer, her heart lighter. She confessed fragments of her past, her scars, her loneliness. He listened without judgment, his silence steady, his presence unyielding. She felt her soul awaken, her loneliness dissolve, her hope return. Yet doubt lingered. She caught herself staring at him, her breath quickening when his eyes met hers. He spoke of her scars not as disgrace but as proof of survival. She froze, her heart twisting, convinced he was mocking her. No one had ever spoken of her scars as anything but shame. She withdrew, her silence heavy, her suspicion sharp. She believed his compassion was pity, his closeness a cruel reminder of what she could never have. She fled into the ruins, her heart breaking, her soul trembling. But danger followed her. Shadows moved against her, blades drawn, voices whispering rebellion. She braced herself for betrayal, certain he would not come. Yet he did. He stepped forward, shielding her with his body, risking himself without hesitation. His hands were steady as he fought, his voice calm as he reassured her. When the threat was gone, he knelt beside her, tending to her wounds with care. His touch was gentle, his eyes filled with concern. She stared at him, disbelief warring with hope, her silence louder than any decree. Her defenses cracked. The bitterness she had carried for so long began to dissolve. She realized that suspicion had been born from loneliness, from the ache of never being chosen. And now, here was a human who had chosen her instinctively, who stayed even when she tried to drive him away, who risked himself without hesitation. She whispered, her voice trembling. "Why do you keep doing this?" He answered simply, "Because you matter." The words struck her harder than any blade, harder than any insult. She stared at him, her eyes wide, her heart racing, her silence speaking louder than her words. She began to watch him differently. His laughter no longer felt mocking. It felt alive. His unpredictability no longer frightened her. It fascinated her. She found herself drawn to his warmth, to the way he spoke without calculation, to the way he touched her hand without hesitation. She realized that humans carried something her people did not: emotion unbound, love unmeasured, courage born not of logic but of heart. The ruins became less silent, less heavy, less eternal. She found herself speaking more, her voice softer, her heart lighter. She confessed fragments of her past, her exile, her scars. He listened without judgment, his silence steady, his presence unyielding. She felt her soul awaken, her loneliness dissolve, her hope return. She realized that perhaps exile was not death, perhaps solitude was not eternal, perhaps survival was not hers alone. One night she whispered, her voice fragile yet certain, "You confuse me, human, but I cannot stop wanting you." He smiled, not mocking, not cruel, but warm. "Then let me keep confusing you." The words carried no logic, no calculation, but they carried something far greater: emotion. She felt her heart soften, her suspicion dissolve, her loneliness replaced by something she had never dared to imagine: love. The decree of the warrior races spread across the galaxy, their voices sharp and unyielding, demanding that the orphan be surrendered and the human executed. They spoke of law, of tradition, of vengeance, insisting that no human could defy their will. She stood trembling, her scars visible, her silence louder than their threats. For a moment she considered surrender, considered retreating into the cold safety of obedience, but before she could speak he stepped forward, his voice steady, his presence unyielding. He declared that his love was not mistake, not fantasy, not weakness. He told them that beauty was not theirs to define, that scars were not shame but survival, that she was more than their decree, more than their law, more than their fear. The chamber of stars echoed with disbelief. They pressed harder, their logic relentless, their tradition unshaken. Yet he did not falter. He spoke of humanity, of emotion, of courage. He told them that humans did not measure worth in crowns or scars, but in the heart that endured, in the soul that refused to break. He told them that she had been hunted, mocked, denied love, but to him she was radiant, powerful, unforgettable. His words carried no calculation, no strategy, but they carried something greater: truth born of love. She stared at him, her eyes wide, her breath caught. No one had ever spoken for her. No one had ever defied the warrior races for her. No one had ever risked themselves to claim her. She felt her world shift, her armor crack, her soul awaken. The bitterness that had haunted her dissolved, replaced by devotion, by hope, by the certainty that she was no longer alone. She realized that humans were different, that they saw beyond scars, beyond rejection, beyond fear. They saw with their hearts, and in that vision, she was not mocked, not discarded, not forbidden. She was chosen. The warriors demanded silence, demanded obedience, demanded that he step back. But she no longer heard them. All that mattered was the man before her, the human who had risked everything to stand beside her. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "You confuse me, human," she whispered. "But you have given me something I never believed I could have." He met her gaze, his eyes unwavering, his presence steady. "Then let me keep giving it to you." The silence grew heavier, the moment eternal. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling, her scars visible, her vulnerability laid bare. He took her hand without hesitation, his grip firm yet gentle, a promise without words. The warriors gasped, their disbelief shattered by the undeniable truth before them. She was no longer the orphan hunted by decree, no longer the exile silenced by tradition. She was a woman who had chosen, and she had chosen him. Her heart melted, her soul ignited, her world forever changed. She whispered, her voice soft but powerful, "They wanted me dead, but you gave me life." His answer was simple, his voice steady, his words unforgettable. "And I will never let you go." The stars shimmered above them, the silence heavy, the moment eternal. She had been bound by duty, mocked by her people, denied love. But now she was chosen, loved, cherished. The human had shown her that beauty was not in perfection, not in fear, not in cruelty, but in courage, in vulnerability, in love. And in that truth, she found herself reborn.